Woof. All right. I thought I'd be excited to be here on a Tuesday. We typically do the show Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We decided to move things around this week because Packers reaction. I don't want to wait 48 hours to do it. Not so happy to be here on a Tuesday. It's Mr. Irrelevant. I'm Alex Strouf with you from the Everlight Solar Studio downtown Madison, Wisconsin. Ryan Wollersheim helping us out running the show today and tomorrow with Hunter Vaughn out in Dallas on vacation. He got to, as a Cowboys fan, Hunter got to be a little bit more celebratory than we will be today as the Packers fall on Monday Night Football on the road at the New York Giants, a final of 24-22. A walk-off field goal for Randy Bullock, who was wearing number 46 to win the game. I don't often accept responsibility. It's kind of a red flag of mine. I'm not a guy that enjoys accepting responsibility when I do something wrong most of the time, especially when it comes to on the air. But I am willing to do that today. Two things. So number one, we do every week for ESPN Madison, we do like a social media graphic where 12 of our hosts and on-air personalities predict the score. And I think for the first time since week one against the Bears, now I take that back because I think Rutledge picked the Bears to win that game. I think maybe the first time all season, all 12 of us picked the Packers to win. And I am a firm believer that when the panel is unanimous, you're wrong. And Scott Van Pelt on Monday Night Countdown last night did a great bit where they showed like 4 or 5 of their predictions from previous Monday night games this year where the panel was unanimous and they were wrong. And so we were wrong on that mark. The second thing is in relation to Randy Bullock, who missed a field goal earlier in the game. I tweeted something around the lines of, here it is. Yeah, you're not making a kick in the NFL wearing a number in the 40s. Well, Randy Bullock made a kick, and it happened to be a big one, as it was the walk-off for the New York Giants, now 5-8. You know I am a fully reactionary, right? Like, I ride the roller coaster like nobody's business, man. 2 hands in the air, I'm riding the freaking roller coaster. And it has been a roller coaster this season. But if we take a step back, aside from my delusion and my reactions and my overreaction specifically, and we just go back to August, or Gabe Neitzel, who will join us from ESPN Milwaukee. We do a show with Jason Wilde every July at Summerfest. We do a 2 or 3 hour special called The State of the Packers ahead of training camp starting. So if we go back to the Summerfest trailer, I think it was on July 7th, as the 3 of us are in a sweaty trailer right on Lake Michigan on the Summerfest grounds talking about the Packers. I think if you told me they're 6-7 through 13 games, I'd probably be like, yeah, that seems about right. And they probably lost a couple they shouldn't, and they probably won a couple they shouldn't have. And that sounds about right. But when you're in the middle of it, when you are in the middle of the season, the expectations change. Especially when you go on the road to Detroit on a short week on Thanksgiving, and you beat Detroit, who's one of the best teams in the NFC, at least at that point they were. And then you return home the following week, and you beat the reigning Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs, you think maybe going to New Jersey to take on the Giants, led by Tommy DeVito, isn't the hardest task in the world. Even shorthanded without Christian Watson and Luke Musgrave and Aaron Jones and Quay Walker and Jair Alexander, even without all those guys, it seems like coming off of wins over the Lions and the Chiefs, you should be able to go to New York, beat the Giants, who aren't very good. Yeah, that's not what happened. The Packers looked horrible for the first 3 quarters of that game. The defense looked bad the whole game, or most of the game, probably the last 3 quarters more so. Special teams was atrocious. It was a disgrace to special teams. So Rich Bisaccia, yeah, he should be getting some, but also this falls on players' execution more than coaching, I think, today, is ultimately where I'll land. But overall, bad from the Green Bay Packers. It was a game they shouldn't have won anyway. It was a game they shouldn't have even been in a position to win. The turnovers early, the special teams blunders, the defense, again, can't stop a nosebleed when it comes to the rush game. They let Tommy DeVito run for 71 yards. 71 yards. He had run for 41 against Dallas back on November 12th. And other than that, he's under 20 yards a game. 71 yards against Green Bay. That's horrible from the quarterback. And then Saquon Barkley, like, you expect him to have a good game, and he does. I think it was 80 yards or so on the ground, 86 yards and 2 touchdowns. It's kind of what you expect out of Saquon Barkley. But you caught some breaks. The turf monster, the penalties. Is it a touchdown? Is it not a touchdown? We've been in that spot on Monday night before if you're a Packers fan. Throw back to the inner touchdownception. I am so blown away by how dumb that game was. That was the dumbest football game I've ever watched. Turf monsters, penalties, officials not knowing whether or not they need to make a call for 46 minutes at a time. And then you have a touchdown that wasn't a touchdown. Then you have a touchdown that might be a touchdown, but the referee gets knocked over. So it takes 27 seconds in order for him to tell you it's a touchdown. It was the dumbest game of football ever. Dumbest. Punt muffs. Each team had a turnover on special teams. It was horrible. It wasn't like painful to watch, but it was a really dumb game of football. That's my take on that. So overall, bad from the Packers. On the Giants side of things, though, the Packers made Tommy DeVito look like Tommy Brady. I mean, legitimately, the dude had an awesome game. He was awesome last night. And the celebration, the agent, the parents, like we have a picture. I mean, I know it's gone viral. Everybody's seen it. But the picture of Tommy DeVito's agent, Sean Stellato, where with the top hat and the all-black suit, and he just looks as Italian as can be. He looks like like he's wearing a Halloween costume. He looks like an extra playing an Italian in a mobster film. Like, he looks like he was told to dress up that way. It's ridiculous. He got shown on TV more this week than Taylor Swift got shown on TV a week ago when the Packers beat the Chiefs. And I don't even think it was close. Like, I saw Sean Stellato and Tommy DeVito's parents on television 25 times. I don't even know if that's an exaggeration. I only saw Taylor Swift last week like twice or three times. Taylor Swift is the #1 artist on Spotify's global charts. Sean Stellato is a guy nobody had heard of until yesterday. So the DeVito magic is like the new Linsanity in New York. The guy was terrific last night. His first 2 balls were in the dirt, and I think he threw 2 other incompletions the rest of the night. He had a terrific night, and then not to mention on the ground. So DeVito magic is real. But the Packers bad in all 3 phases. Offensively, they could get nothing going. Nothing going. And then late, they're pretty much just waving the white flag and pulling out all these trick plays. Matt LaFleur got way too cute yesterday in the play calling department. Like, I love Jaden Reed more than everybody else. I've been telling you since the day Jaden Reed was drafted, the kid's going to be a stud. And he is. He's a stud. But he isn't a running back. This isn't Ty Montgomery we're dealing with here. The end around doesn't work. Stop. Like, you could do it once or twice, but 14 times is just too much for the end around to Jaden Reed. I just about threw a remote through the television when they went back to that in the fourth quarter. They were all over it, the Giants' defense was. So that was frustrating offensively. Jordan Love settled in, but the turnovers early were gross. He was throwing really bad footballs in the first half. He's done this before. We saw that in the Saints game, which almost ended in similar fashion. We're just lucky the Saints kicker in week 3 missed the kick at the end of the game. Jordan Love settled in and looked the part again late. But the first 2.5 or so quarters, not so much. He reverted back to early season October Jordan Love. So that was not an encouraging sign. And special teams already talked about it, but geez. Rich Bisaccia is supposed to be like the second coming of Bill Belichick as a special teams coordinator. And it was awful all over the place. Bad kick at one point. Durst misses a field goal that ultimately would have been won you the game early on. Keyshawn Nixon had, I don't even think it's debatable. Keyshawn Nixon has the worst game as a Packer on defense and special teams. Everything was bad from this game. Now, the question is this normal or is this an exception? Because the last 3 weeks tell us this might be an exception, but the 4-game losing streak prior to that tells you maybe this is just what the Packers are. So that's what we have to figure out with 4 games left. Packers 6-7, still the 7th seed in the NFC. But there are 6 teams in the NFC, including the Packers' opponent on Sunday, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are 6-7. And the Bucs have an easier path to the playoffs because they are still in first place of the NFC South, but those 5 other teams are all fighting for this final spot. And the Packers just better thank the football gods today because everything on Sunday broke their way, that they are still the 7 seed, coming off of a disgusting loss to the New York Giants last night on Monday Night Football. Everything about that game was bad. All right. I don't feel any better. And I did this on purpose. Gabe Neitzel, our buddy from ESPN Milwaukee, you hear him on Jen, Gabe, and Chewy, you hear him on Green Bay Game Night. I booked him on purpose today because I knew if the Packers were going to win, he was actually going to support my over-enthusiasm. He was going to help me, be just completely delusional. He was going to be supportive of that because he's a great guy. But now that they just had a total blunder, he's going to come on here in 90 seconds and tell me, told you so, Stroufy. I told you in July. This isn't a good team. It's going to be up and down. We're going to hear from Gabe Neitzel coming up next. I have no idea what he's going to say. I'm excited for it, though. It's Mr. Irrelevant. I'm Alex Strouf. Gabe Neitzel joins us next. As always, our featured conversation on Mr. Irrelevant brought to you by my friends at Door County Distillery, locally produced, handcrafted, and award-winning spirits. They do it better than anybody else, and they're local, and they're delicious, so why not pick up some Door County Distillery like I did last night? I had a little bit of the bourbon last night, but they do everything well, whether it's the Rock Island rum, whether it's that signature bottle of gin. They've got 3 kinds of whiskeys, all award-winning, and all the in-betweens. Check them out. DoorCountyDistillery.com is the website. You can find the retailer nearest you, a huge list of unique cocktail recipes and everything they make as well. Check out as well on ESPN Madison's YouTube page, the Sippin' with Strouf series. I'm mixing up some of the cocktails, learning more about the background of Door County Distillery and all the awesome things they do up in Carlsville. So make sure you check that out as well. But the most important thing is, with the holidays coming up, you elevate your holiday gathering with anything and everything from Door County Distillery. Go to their website, DoorCountyDistillery.com. Find the retailer nearest you and pick up some delicious Door County Distillery. Let's talk with our buddy, Gabe Neitzel. I don't know if I'm going to regret this or not, but joining us now is the great Gabe Neitzel. You hear him on 7 to 9 on ESPN Milwaukee. Jen, Gabe, and Chewy. You hear him on Green Bay Game Night. I listened to you last night, Gabe. I thought you were spot on with everything. We were texting yesterday. I told you they're due for a blunder. I just didn't think it was going to be last night, and it was last night. So is this where you say, hey, I told you so?
Well, no, because the crazy part is, Stroufy, is that like when I pictured a Packers loss yesterday, it was Saquon Barkley going wild.
Sure.
And outside of that run that he had that he then fumbled at the end of, like the Packers did a pretty good job against Saquon Barkley yesterday. That was the frustrating part, is that it was Tommy DeVito that did them in. And that's, I know you've got the 3 phases thing over here on your rundown. Yeah, they were terrible. It wasn't, and Joe Barry didn't have a good game, but nobody had a good game. And everybody wants to come out and blame Joe Barry because that's what we do. Like, everybody's been just waiting for reasons to blame Joe Barry. But that was on everybody yesterday. Like, everybody was terrible except for Jordan Love in the last, quarter and a half?
Yeah.
When he kind of got his legs underneath him. And that's the positive to take away from the game is Jordan Love, despite being terrible, the last 3 drives he put together, I think Jason Wilde, read off the stats on Green Bay Game Night last night, where he had a quarterback rating over 100 and with a touchdown pass and all the things that he did, whereas before that was in the 50s or 60s.
Yeah, so, all right, so a couple things on that. Tommy DeVito looked amazing, right? Like, he really looked good, both passing and obviously rushing 71 yards on the ground, which is unacceptable. Now,
did you think his agent looked good? Did you like the look his agent was sporting?
Yeah, we talked about Sean Stellato. He's just an absolute, look at him, like just an absolute cartoon character, Gabe. I actually support it, but I said, like, it looks like he got the phone call 40 minutes before he had to be at the stadium because he was going to be an extra in like a mobster movie. That's what it looks like to me. Just like a total stereotypical extra in a mobster movie.
Yeah, but apparently this is who this guy is because like now more videos are popping up of this guy, and this is just how he dresses. Like that was like I saw him in like more of a like there was a red highlight on his fedora. Like this is just the way this guy dresses. This seemed pretty muted, compared to some of the other things that I saw. Like this is all black here that we're looking at. Like, that's pretty muted compared to some of the other like videos I saw on social media over the last, I don't know, 12, 14 hours or so.
Ryan, keep the picture up for a second. Is he wearing friendship bracelets? I didn't catch this until right now. He's like wearing, he knows the Packers beat Taylor Swift last week. It looks like he's got friendship bracelets while he's on the phone. And Gabe, who's he on the phone with? You think he's like calling out for a hit on Joe Barry? Or like, I don't know, man. It is the most unbelievable photo. They showed him more than Taylor Swift on TV last night than they did.
100%. Well, because then his dad's giving everybody kisses in the stands. He's kissing the agent on the cheek. He's kissing the mom on the cheek. Everybody's going crazy, and everybody's going. I mean, when you said Jeremy Lin, that's what it reminded me of instantly. Like a guy who came out of nowhere in New York and probably ends up being a bigger star in the short window just because he's in New York. Like Jeremy Lin had a great run. Guys do that all the time in the NBA, but because it's the Knicks, it becomes Linsanity, and he's on the cover of Sports Illustrated back when that meant something. And because it's the NFL and because it's the Giants, you've got another quarterback here doing some unbelievable things who's going to be a star here for the next couple of weeks. Yeah, and then has that as a celebration.
Yeah, he'll capitalize on it. He has all the marketing right. The agents come and doll that. It's unbelievable. So hold on. I want to go back to your point on Joe Barry. So we know he's under fire, and he has been since he's been the coordinator in Green Bay. But last night, I view it more as like a player execution issue than I do a Joe Barry issue. This is a team that was sacked, what is it, Gabe, 69 times in the first 12 weeks? And
first of all, nice, yes.
Yes, very nice. And
69. I like that number.
I've never heard that drop before, Ryan. Well done.
He was so ready for it, too.
He was way too ready. 0 sacks last night against a guy that's barely played in the NFL, was an undrafted rookie. Like, that's unacceptable. And it could be a schematic issue, but I didn't see a ton of full-out blitzes, but 0 sacks is bad. So I don't know. I think I blame more player execution than I do Joe Barry last night defensively, specifically.
Oh, 100%. And I think you can blame Joe Barry because the one thing with Saquon, he did get a couple of good runs right before he fumbled it. And Joe Barry was able to get manipulated into having the 2 down linemen, even though they consider the outside linebackers. Those are like linemen. It becomes a 4-3. But you've got the extra defensive back on the field, and that was, Joe Barry can easily get manipulated into that when teams want to run the ball. And the Giants were up by 5. They were trying to run the football at that point, looking to put the game away, which if Saquon Barkley holds on to the football, they're able to. But you're 100% right. Like, a lot of times it just comes down to player execution. And I started thinking about this last night after doing the show, and then the question that I wanted to ask Jason Wilde this morning on Jen, Gabe, and Chewy, and I didn't get around to asking Rob Demoski because I didn't want to ask them both the same question. But it's now in the back of my mind that I'm going to be thinking about, not even just for this year, but going forward. How many field tilting players do the Packers have? Because Rashawn Gary should be a field tilting player. Like he is, right? Like, I mean, they're paying him like he is. He's got 9 sacks, having a great year. And I don't want to dismiss 3 sack games because those are huge. But I want to see a little more consistency out of Rashawn Gary. I mean, he's got 9 sacks. 6 of those sacks are in 2 games. He's got 2 3-sack games, which are fantastic. Again, in those moments, it's great. But when you're getting paid that kind of money, you got to be more consistent. Like, not that you're going to get a sack every game, but 2 quarterback hits. And granted, he had both quarterback hits last night. But 2 quarterback hits on a team that's out, like giving up over 5 sacks a game.
Yeah.
Like that's the part that's frustrating is that I don't know, especially defensively, if the Packers really have any field tilting players. Rashawn Gary has potential to be one, but outside of that, who tilts the field in the Packers' direction? When you think about the Super Bowl teams of, the Brett Super Bowl team, the Aaron Super Bowl team, and this is just talking about defense right now. We can get to the offense if you want. They had a lot of field tilting chips. And whether Joe Barry's here or not, you need those field tilting players that they just, I don't think right now have.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, right? Like, who comes to mind is Kenny, but
Kenny's a good player. He's a good player, but he's not like tilting the field in your direction. If he does, it's very, very minor.
Right.
It just seems that, but that's what it seems like this defense has is a lot of good play. Like, okay, yeah, he's pretty good. Yeah, he's all right. Which is why I have a hard time with the fans in the fan base that were like ready to just get rid of Jair Alexander.
Yeah,
I don't know what's going on with Jair.
I don't either.
Yeah,
but
I don't know what's going on with Jair. Something seems up the way that LaFleur talks about it. But that's a dude that when he's right, he can tilt the field in your direction.
Absolutely.
You saw what he did last year against Justin Jefferson.
Absolutely. But I didn't bring him up for a reason because he's been unavailable more than he's been available this year, which is frustrating
100%.
in its own right. But yeah, some of the Twitter trolls are pissing me off on that one. Did you see the Mike Daniels tweet last night, Gabe? The former Packer, what he tweeted out? I thought he asked the question. I'll read it to you. He said, Packers fans, no matter the coordinator, no matter the personnel, we seem to not be able to be elite on defense. I played alongside legitimate Hall of Fame players, several All-Pros and Pro Bowlers, yet always mid to bottom ranks. Years later, I see the same thing, even with a culture change. Why is that? Mike Daniels, the former Packer, on Twitter. He didn't give an answer. He was asking the question, and he was in the locker room, which bothered me. But that's beside the point. I don't know. What is it?
Like, shouldn't he be the one to be able to answer that for us?
That's what I thought.
He's the one who played in the league.
Right. That's what I thought. He answered people, but didn't really answer people, like saying that, I don't know if it's a mentality issue. I don't think we're soft. So I would love to pick his brain on this, but I just thought the point was true, right? Like the defensive coordinator job in Green Bay might be the worst job in the NFL, coordinator-wise. Everyone has been bad, right? Pettin and Capers and now Barry. It's a horrible job to have.
Capers at the end. Like, I won't let you slander Capers because that defense won a Super Bowl.
Fair, but Capers at the end, not so much.
Yeah. Look, I can't defend Capers at the end. Like, I just can't, right?
But also,
fire Capers was a thing. But I mean, I don't know what it is. If it's just not having the right people in the right pieces, but that's the problem right there, right? Because you invest every first-round pick on a defensive player. Jordan Love's the only offensive player Goody has drafted in the first round. So I wonder if there's something to this. Just kind of wondering out loud here, Stroufy. Like in baseball, they always talk about how defensively you want to be strong up the middle, right? Like you want to have a good catcher, good center fielder, good shortstop. You want to be strong up the middle. Like the Packers at times have had elements of all those things. But really, since that 2010, and in the second half of 2014, when they should have gone to the Super Bowl, and we don't have to talk about what happened in Seattle, but they moved Clay Matthews to the middle to kind of solidify the middle part of that. And that's when Clinton-Dix, like early Clinton-Dix was pretty good. Like he went to a Pro Bowl, and then he just completely fell off the face of the earth. I think it's just been a very long time since the Packers have been really strong up the middle and have had, again, at different points, Kenny Clark's been really good, but then having that really good inside linebacker. Okay, Devondre Campbell had a good year, but other than that, like right. Quay hasn't developed, partially because he's been unavailable to you this year. And then safety's been, a revolving door really since Nick Collins left and had to retire because of the injury. So I wonder if part of the defensive struggles are they haven't been that strong up the middle, where they've had stars on the outside, where Charles Woodson or Jair Alexander, they've had the star at the pass rushing position, whether that was Zadarius Smith or Clay Matthews. I just wonder why it doesn't come together is because you're just not strong up the middle.
It's a good thought, Gabe. I think every point you made there is 100% correct. And the Quay Walker point is another interesting one. Obviously, he's been another guy that you thought was going to make that big year two jump, right? I know you and I talked about it, and we'll talk more about it as we go back to July when we did the State of the Packers show with Jason Wilde and reliving some of the expectations we had then versus now for this team. But he's a guy who I'm a firm believer in either sophomore jump or sophomore slump. I thought he was going to have a huge jump in year two. And he's just been unavailable. And so that part's frustrating. The safety position is the worst on the Packers roster this year. We knew that going into the season. So I don't know. I think it's a good thought. I just the thing that pisses me off the most with this defense is that there's just been so much investment, yet the issue remains that they can't stop the rush. And last night, to your point earlier, it wasn't necessarily Saquon. He had that huge run, and then the turf monster grabbed him at MetLife, and he fumbled it, thankfully. Packers caught a huge break there. But Tommy DeVito is beating you with his legs. And this is a team that had been sacked, one of, if not the most in the NFL, heading into this game. So why are you not able to stop a third-string quarterback when you're having success, for the most part, against an all-pro running back? I don't know, man. There's so much investment here, and they can't stop the run, and that continues to be the issue year after year after year. David Montgomery had a huge game against them earlier in the year. Obviously, Bijan Robinson had his huge game in September. They can't stop the run. And I don't have
so
a
Rob
solution.
Demovsky pointed this out to us this morning, Strouf. So he hadn't looked to see how many had happened since then. But after the Pittsburgh game, that was the third time the Packers gave up 200 yards rushing. There were only 13 across the NFL. Only 13 200-yard rushing games for teams across the NFL. The Packers were responsible for 3 of those 13. Ooh. And now it's a 4th. And I can't imagine that between the Giants game and the last month, there have been a ton of 200-yard rushing games. So the Packers are, doing their job trying to keep the run alive in 2023.
All right. I'm done talking about the defense, Gabe. I can't handle it. I'm going to have an aneurysm on the air if we keep talking about the defense. Offensively, not a whole lot better yesterday. We'll get to Jordan Love. But the Jayden Reed thing, I think you may have caught my tail end of that rant. I love Jayden Reed, man. I think he is he's going to be a phenomenal player in the NFL. I think he has sky-high potential. But what the hell's up with Matt LaFleur thinking he's Ty Montgomery 2.0 and all these end-arounds? Matt LaFleur just got too cute with his play calling, and he ran the ball to Jayden Reed like 86 times. I don't know why we keep going back to that one.
Well, and the funny part is, so when I first looked at when I'm doing Green Bay game night, I usually on my laptop that I have in front of me, because I've got the call screen, the texters, all that. Yep. I usually just have the box score up, and it's got it felt like Jayden Reed was running the ball a whole heck of a lot more. He only had 4 carries. He had 4 carries for 38 yards. That's better than I thought. And then you look at his receiving numbers, because a lot of those jet sweeps they run are the pop pass.
Right.
So it becomes 8 for 27. 8 receptions for 27 yards. I think that's the most receptions and the least amount of yards I think I've ever seen for anybody in NFL history. 8 for 27 is outrageous. That is so bad for a wide receiver, and a lot of it because they were without those pop passes. And I'm with you. I understand wanting to get the ball and finding ways to get it into Jayden Reed's hands. You have to do that. And clearly that's been a point of emphasis because they've started the last 2 games with that little pop pass jet sweep end around to Jayden Reed. And Matt LaFleur admitted it after the game that for whatever reason he fell in love with it and even tried to go back to it. The carry on the 2-point conversion doesn't count, right? That doesn't factor into those stats that I just listed for Jayden Reed. So I understand wanting to get him the ball. I don't know why LaFleur got into the rhythm of, all right, I guess this is what we have to do, unless it was they just became so beat up at wide receiver. And, you had Dontavian Wicks out. So now you've got Malik Heath getting a lot of snaps. And Samori Toure ended up getting a couple of snaps, had a couple of catches last night. So he's like, okay, I don't – and then when you have guys like Toure and Heath back in there, and Heath's made a couple of plays here and there because he's been active recently. I don't know if that's a situation where LaFleur kind of went back into the early season shell of, oh, crap, we don't have enough guys out there who know what they're doing. So now I guess we just have to run this one play that everybody kind of knows. I don't know if that's part of the issue. Hopefully that gets rectified this week, because here's the thing, Stroufy. I am terrified for this game against Tampa Bay.
Me too.
And it's because they're beat up at wide receiver. Mm-hmm. And it's because, when you have, Dontavian Wicks, who I'm huge in. I think Wicks and Reed are the 2 best, most consistent wide receivers.
Totally agree.
When he's telling a TV reporter from WFRV up in Green Bay that he thinks that his ankle is bleeped up, and he thinks it's a high ankle sprain, all right, I don't think he's playing. I don't think Christian Watson's ever played. Anytime he has had a hamstring, this isn't the first, obviously, it's more than a 1-week injury, so I'm not expecting him to play. And Jayden Reed, because the last run they ran on the 2-point conversion, was being evaluated for a concussion at the end of the game. And if you got a concussion, good luck coming back in 6 days. So that makes me very concerned heading into what is going to be a pretty big game with 2 6-7 teams at Lambeau on Sunday.
I was already worried about this game. When you and I were texting, and I said, I know they have a blunder coming. This is the game I've had circled for weeks. I thought Tampa, they're just kind of one of those sneaky, I don't want to say sneaky good because I don't know that they're necessarily good, but they're sneaky okay. And I think the Packers
they've got some weapons that you got to pay attention to.
Absolutely. And defensively, they're still solid, right? They're not the Super Bowl team from a couple of years ago, but they're still better than the Packers on that side of the ball. And without all those guys, and you're already missing Musgrave and likely Jones again, I'm super worried about what that one will turn into. So that leads me to this. Let's rewind to July, I think it was 7th. We are sweating in our trailer at Summerfest with Jason Wilde doing our annual State of the Packers show, which is one of the highlights of my year every year, just because we get to nerd out a little bit. And we don't get to nerd out that deep too often on the air. and we get to do just kind of the overall at-large 20,000 view look or 20,000-foot view look at the Green Bay Packers, where they stand, what the season is. Every year it turns into you and Jason just crushing my hopes and dreams. And
yeah, that's happened the last 2 years. It hasn't been good.
It has. And it will likely, maybe it won't happen next year, but I'm not going to look ahead to that yet. And we kind of just all ended up agreeing this is probably at best like a 500 football team. And I'm curious from your perspective, because you know me, man. Like, I ride the roller coaster like nobody's business. 2 hands in the air. I'm reacting one way or another, overreacting one way or another all the time. 6-7, still maybe a playoff team. What do we know about the Green Bay Packers through 13 games? They're 6-7. They've beaten the Chiefs and the Lions. They've lost to the Broncos and the Raiders and now the Giants. I just don't really know what to expect now, especially if they're as beat up as they likely will be on Sunday. Are they a playoff team? Like, where do you stand the Tuesday after a Monday night loss?
I think that this is still a playoff team. 47% chance after they beat the Lions and the Chiefs. And I understand those. Chewy this morning tried to take some of the luster off of those wins. Like, well, look at the Lions. They just got blown out by the Bears, and the Chiefs just lost to the Bills. They're like, I mean, those are still really good football teams. Like, one's 9-3, the other one's 8-5. Those are still 2 playoff teams that I would expect to win playoff game, at least one for both of them. So those are still quality wins. And anytime you beat Patrick Mahomes and you get the stop at the end, yes, you got the assist with the lack of pass interference penalty called, you get excited because you get to see this team starting to put it together. And given what the rest of the schedule is, like, you take a look at, Carolina you should beat. They're just an absolute dumpster fire. The Minnesota Vikings are rolling with Nick Mullins now because the Pastronaut, Josh Dobbs, was actually throwing legit hospital balls to Justin Jefferson. So now who knows if Jefferson's going to be available for that game on New Year's Eve. And then you have a game against the Bears at Lambeau Field. I still don't know what really the Bears are, but I would say right now that this should be a playoff team where my expectations changed the second you win those 2 games back-to-back. Like, okay, you win one of those games, you sneak up on one of those teams, beat them, great. You beat both those teams back-to-back, you have the potential to be a playoff team. You just have to find a way to be able to consistently do it. Now, injuries certainly could be the big thing that holds them back. And I am going to be looking for the availability of those 3 wide receivers that I just talked about throughout the course of the week, because that's going to have a huge impact on the upcoming game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So maybe injuries hold them back, but they can do it. And that they have the ability to put games and string games together. And so my expectations have changed. What do I know in terms of the answer to that question? I know that Jordan Love is a capable NFL quarterback.
Yep, I agree.
And I know that he can perform no matter the most impressive thing about him all year long, because there are obviously things he can work on. Had another bad interception on a deep ball last night. But it doesn't matter what's happened the first 3 quarters. The dude can put it behind that and then just start slinging the ball and be the best version of himself despite putting together 3 bad quarters. And that's really hard to do. So if that alone, if you're talking about 2023, and this is where the camp I was in back on July 7th, 2023 was about the growth of Jordan Love. We have seen a lot of growth out of Jordan Love throughout the entire course of the season.
Yeah, I think that's really well put. And I saw Matt LaFleur said after the game, I hope we have a short memory. And the one guy I don't think he has to worry about in regards to that is Jordan Love. I think he's responded so well all year long, despite some really bad mistakes, a couple in which we saw last night against the Giants. But overall, I'm with you, Gabe. I think he has proven he belongs. How good can he be is still to be determined. But the floor continues to rise for him, which I think is an encouraging sign. Now, as we try to figure out whether or not they're still a playoff team, I'm with you. I think they are. But it just got a little bit tougher with the loss last night. I think 9-8 is still good enough. So I think if they go 3-1 over the course of these last 4, they're in. I don't know if 8-9 is good enough. I don't think you can split these last 4 and make it. So they've got to win 3 of the last 4, and I'm really nervous about this week, which means if they lose Sunday, that's 3-0 in the last 3.
So I am of the thinking if they win on Sunday, they'll make the playoffs. Like they'll find a way. And I think if they lose on Sunday, I think ultimately they're going to be out because losing another game and losing to the Giants, there's just so many teams right now at 6 and 7.
It's crazy.
Who knows how that all plays out? And to have the tiebreaker only over the Saints, like that would be a tough spot to be in. That would be a really tough spot to be in. Maybe you get the tiebreaker over the Vikings. Again, I just don't know what they are at this point if Nick Mullins is their quarterback going forward. But like I look at those other teams and you would have then 2 more conference losses. So you're below 500 in terms of the conference right now. I would just have a hard time seeing this very well could come down to tiebreakers. And if you lose another game to a team that's in that tight race, and maybe Tampa Bay wins that division and you don't have to worry about them in a tiebreaker scenario, I'm worried that another loss with all these tiebreakers looming would ultimately doom them. Because here's the problem. If you lose to Tampa Bay, then you definitely can lose that game against Minnesota. That's on the road at Minnesota. Like that becomes a real possibility. So I think that this is a really important game for the Packers on Sunday in terms of making the playoffs.
Yeah, I think that's 100% correct. I will say this, though. I have eliminated evaluating the opposing quarterback into my pregame analysis. I'm done with that because I've seen that Desmond Ridder, Kenny Pickett, and Tommy DeVito beat the Packers this year. And was it Aiden O'Connell or Jimmy G against the Raiders? Who was their quarterback?
It was Jimmy G.
It was Jimmy G. Okay,
it was
so
Jimmy
no
G.
shot at him.
Well, I mean, shot at him, right? Like, because you lost to a team like that. They've been so bad on Monday night. Like they lost to the Raiders, who not very long after they beat the Packers, fired their coach and benched their quarterback.
And fired their GM too. Not to add to
Yeah, well, cherry on top.
Yeah, right. I mean, yeah, you're right about that. All right, last thing before I let you go, I did some research when you were talking about Jaden Reed. So his 8 catches for 27 yards? Not even the first Packers wide receiver / running back to have 8 catches for less than 30 yards. Ty Montgomery against the Cincinnati Bengals on September 24th, 2017 had 8 catches for 15 yards, Gabe. How's that for research?
8 for 15?
8 for 15 for Packers legend Ty Montgomery.
He had to have like a negative 10 one in there, right? Because look at A.J. Dillon's stat line. Like A.J. Dillon, who didn't run the ball well yesterday, he had 2 catches for 25 yards with a long of 35 because Jordan hung him out to dry by just throwing him the ball 10 yards behind the line of scrimmage, and there was nothing that A.J. Dillon could do.
Yeah, 8 catches, 15 yards.
There had to have been a play like that.
He had 12 carries for 35 yards as well. So he was the leading running back and leading pass catcher in that game was Ty Montgomery. So
so he had 20 – God, no wonder that 2017 team stunk.
Yeah, it was a total disaster.
20 touches in a game?
Yeah, that was Ty Montgomery fever, man. That was right after the run the table season. So yeah, everybody was pro Ty Montgomery, even Mike McCarthy, maybe a little bit too much. So hopefully Jaden Reed is more Deebo Samuel than Ty Montgomery. That's all I hope for.
That's how you want to end this? Like, I don't want to hear about how me and Jason brought you down once upon a time at Summerfest. Like, dude, that's more depressing than anything I've ever done to you.
All I do is overreact, and that doesn't always mean positively. Today, it's certainly not positive. I don't know how to make it positive. What is positive, though, Gabe, I'll tell you this. Last night, I turned off the game right as it was over. I turned on Green Bay game night, and I poured myself a little bourbon from my friends at Door County Distillery. And
that's where I'm jealous. Like, I love doing the post-game show, but, like, it's games like last night where I just wish I could have just a taste.
Just a little drink and relax. And I'm listening to you and these callers just bitch and moan back and forth. It actually made me a lot less depressed. I was just sitting there laughing my ass off because you and who were you arguing about? I forget. Right off Keyshawn Nixon being a returner.
Yeah.
You're like, how are you calling for his head off an all-pro season? What are we doing here? He had his worst game as a Packer last night. I get it, but
yeah, look, I'm not defending. Like, I'm not defending the game he had. I'll defend the decision to put him back there and return a punt.
Right. So, anyway, so that made me feel a little bit better. Is that therapeutic for you, the post-game show after bad losses like last night?
Yeah, it is, because especially like that first hour and a half, depending upon how much time Tausch has, and like the dynamic that he and Homer have, like I sit back and just listen to those two, and that is therapeutic for me. Like listening to those two go back and forth and argue their points, and because I mean those are two of the best people we have at ESPN Wisconsin, and they're both a little ridiculous, which makes them so good at what they do. So like just them going back and forth and not really hearing each other, it's very entertaining.
They don't listen to each other. They just both want to get their point across, and that's what makes it so good. You are the best, dude. You're the hardest working man in showbiz. Appreciate you as always. We'll do this again soon, and hopefully we can be a little bit more positive next time we do it.
I'm looking forward to it.
That's Gabe Neitzel, Jen, Gabe, and Chewy, weekday morning, 7 to 9 on ESPN Milwaukee. Does the Green Bay Game Night post-game show on 620 WTMJ and ESPN Wisconsin after every Green Bay game. You hear him on ESPN Radio nationally. You hear him on Marquette pregame. He does it all. He's Mr. Do-It-All. He's the best. Gabe Neitzel. Find him on Twitter at GNeitzel16. All right, when we come back, we'll wrap it up. That was actually the stat I was going to use in what Strouf learned, so we'll probably just talk more about Tommy DeVito's agent as we wrap up the show. Coming up next, it's Mr. Relevant. I'm Alex Strouf. All right, the Packers will look to rebound this Sunday as they play host to Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at Lambeau Field. Join us for Green Bay Game Day beginning at 9 a.m. on 620 WTMJ, 94.5 ESPN Milwaukee, and 100.5 ESPN Madison. Kyle Wallace, Tori Lowe will be with me, as well as Rob Demovsky and Jason Wilde, as we preview the matchup between two 6-7 NFC teams that are currently in playoff position. The Bucs 6-7, the 4 seed in the NFC. The Packers 6-7, currently the 7 seed in the NFC. Big game for both of these teams coming up Sunday, so make sure you get ready for it. Hopefully it's not as ugly as last night. It's Green Bay Game Day beginning at 9 a.m. on those stations, as well as available on the ESPN Madison and ESPN Milwaukee YouTube channels for Green Bay Game Day. Oh, man. Gabe Neitzel's the best. That was awesome. It's Mr. Irrelevant. I'm Alex Strouf, wrapping it up in just a second. Ryan Wollersheim with us running the show. You haven't said anything today, Ryan. How are you feeling after that Packers loss last night?
I had the day off yesterday of work.
You did?
I was looking forward to getting home that night. I was at home in Neenah, Wisconsin, in the Fox Valley. Was excited to get back home to Madison to watch that game on Monday night, and it really ruined my day off. There's no other way about it. I hated watching everything about that game. The only thing I found amusing, honestly, was the Tommy DeVito agent and family storyline, because that, as much as watching that game was pitiful and was excruciating for me as a Packers fan, I could not help but smile about this Tommy DeVito stuff.
So what I've learned, and you and I were kind of talking about this off the air a little bit, is that with all the quarterback injuries in the league, like Justin Herbert's season is over. We found that out right before the show today for the Chargers. There's been so many quarterback injuries in the league this year. Rodgers and Jones and now Herbert and Burrow, and the list goes on and on and on. The NFL has gone a far way to make superstars out of anybody they can, and Taylor Swift being one of them. There was that Chargers woman who's actually a Vikings fan. Do you remember that? Like, probably a month or two ago.
It's crazy how much 2 months ago in the NFL feels like 3 years ago.
Oh, dude, it does. But it's also crazy to think the NFL season is already, what are we going into now, week 15? Next week?
No, week 15, I guess.
It'll be week 15.
4 more games.
Yeah, week 15 next week already, right? So, like, in the same breath as we say that feels like it was 3 years ago, the NFL season just flies by.
Yeah.
And we are getting down to the nitty-gritty now. And we mentioned it at the top, 6 teams in the NFC. So there's 16 teams in the NFC. Over a third of them have the same record at 6-7. Yeah. Packers being one of those teams. The Bucs being one of those teams who we'll see on Sunday. So I am blown away by the superstardom of just random people. So you have that Chargers fan from a couple months ago, Taylor Swift, and now the DeVito family. And I saw you were trying to get it ready. Do we have a video for the video stream watchers of Tommy DeVito's father just smooching? And so there he smooches the agent. I assume that's DeVito's brother. The agent smooches him back. They're just giving kisses everywhere. This was the highlight of the game, aside from maybe thinking the Packers might stumble their way into a victory. And I just wish... And everybody on Packers Twitter now has really picked up on Matt LaFleur's press conference and locker room shticks, right? That seemed to be a big topic yesterday. And I saw a tweet, I forget who it was from. I'd love to give credit, but like, I do not want the Packers to win this game strictly because I don't want to hear Matt LaFleur's post-game locker room speech about how he's so proud of the guys. He's never seen that much fight out of a team, which, to their defense, whoever tweeted that, would have happened had the Packers won that game.
Yeah, that would have been dead on. That was a perfect impersonation.
Yeah, and then, of course, after the game, he's like, this wasn't good enough. We were bad on all three phases. He just kind of recycles old material, which is fine.
What do you
I
expect
believe
him
in him
to
as a
say,
coach.
right? I mean, like
My
it's
headphones came
true.
unplugged, so bear with me for a second.
Oh, okay. Well,
I can't hear you.
I'll vamp for 2 seconds while you get that plug back in. You got it now?
I got you.
Yeah, but like, what do you expect him to say at the end of the game? Like that,
He was right.
It's brutally honest. That's what happened.
He's right. It was a firm ass kicking, is what that was.
Would you say it was an ass kicking? Really? I felt like they just
Self-destruct,
yeah,
maybe more so than
self-destruct.
ass kicking.
They just bumbled through a full game. They bumbled through it like
Bumbled.
yeah, bumbled is the best word I can think of. Like honestly, like it. I don't know if that's an Italian type word, but it felt appropriate
Bumbled.
for everything that was going on in that game.
Tommy DeVito's a superstar. The Packers, are they the October Packers? Are they a playoff team? We're going to find out. We're going to continue to break it down. So as you're listening, this is a Tuesday episode. We usually do Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We're going to do Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday this week. Guest lineup, we changed it up. We're doing no more Packers with guests the rest of the week just because I'm going to do Packers. Everybody else is going to do everything else. Tomorrow, really excited about tomorrow's episode. We're going to do more Packers reaction. But we're going to talk to Devin Robinson from the Wisconsin volleyball team, an All-American, multiple-time All-American, friend of the show, friend of the station, friend of me. Devin Robinson going to be our guest tomorrow as Wisconsin volleyball in their fourth Final Four of the last 5 years. They play Thursday in Tampa, Florida. They play Texas on Thursday. So we're going to talk to Devin Robinson on tomorrow's episode about Wisconsin volleyball, the revitalization of that program, the growth of women's volleyball, which she's been such a huge part of. So Devin Robinson will be our guest tomorrow. Coming up Friday, we're going to talk to Billy Kegler from Madison College, the 608 basketball tournament coming to town. We might do a little bit more preview. We might have a second guest on Friday's show ahead of Packers-Bucks. But Bill Kegler will join us Friday to talk about the 608 basketball tournament, which I will be at Friday, Saturday. We carry all those games, all 6 games on 100.5 ESPN and available for video streaming as well. So looking forward to that coming up this weekend. Looking forward to chatting with D-Rob tomorrow. A big thanks to Gabe Neitzel for his time today. Therapeutic, man. Like, I do find radio therapeutic and podcasting therapeutic because you just got to talk through the shit, and that's what we did today,
Yeah.
right? Like, they bumbled their way through. I'm going to steal that, Ryan. Yeah, they bumbled their way through that game yesterday, and sometimes you just got to talk through the shit. Like, I think that's what therapy is anyway. Like, you go to therapy to solve your problems, and this is my version of sports fandom therapy. It's just you just talk about it. So,
Dr. Alex Strouf.
no, I'm not the doc. I'm the patient, bro. I'm the patient in this scenario. Maybe you're the doctor orchestrating everything back there. Appreciate you filling in. We'll talk more to you tomorrow, Ryan Wollersheim. Thanks to Gabe Neitzel. More Packers reaction coming up on tomorrow's episode of Mr. Irrelevant. Can't wait to do it. Thanks for hanging with us today. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Have a great night. This has been Mr. Irrelevant. I'm Alex Strouf. Peace.